In this video, I'm going to walk through a very quick example of how we can use arrays. So here I have a program I have a very simple little program here. This program is going to try to create an array that will hold 5 test scores, and then we're going to prompt the user to enter in 5 test score values. So let me put that in here. Prompt the user to enter 5 score values, and then after all the score values have been entered, we're going to count how many of those score values were passing grades. So we'll define a passing grade as a grade that is greater than or equal to 60 for this example. Now I could solve this problem just by creating 5 individual variables, but what happens if we scale this problem up to enter 50 scores or 5,000 scores or more? So we're going to use an array solution here so that we can scale up the solution very easily. All right, let's get started. So to create an array that will hold 5 test score values, I'm thinking a test score, a double data type would be a good data type to represent a test score. So you could make a 90.5, for example. So I want to create an array that will hold 5 double values. So our syntax will look like this. I'm going to create a double array. Double is the data type that is going to be held in the array. By adding the 2 square brackets at the end of the data type name signifies that this is an array of double values. Now I'm going to give my array a name. Since it's holding test score values or grades, I'll just name it grades. So a double array named grades, and now it's time to build this array. So I'm going to say is equal to a new double array of size 5. So I am constructing an array that will hold 5 double values. Now I could try to assign each value individually, and that wouldn't be too much work for just 5 values. But again, what happens if we scale this up to 50 or 500 values? I don't want to write 500 individual prompts. Instead, why don't I use a loop to handle, I will loop exactly as many times as I need to fill the array. Now this is going to be a write operation in the array. There are 2 ways to loop over an array. I can loop by index, or I can loop by value. Looping by index allows me to read and write from the array, but looping by value only allows me to read. So I'm trying to enter values. This is a write operation. So I have to iterate by index in order to do this work. So let's create a loop that's going to iterate by index. So I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0. The variable I is a counter-controlled variable. It's just going to count, and it's going to represent the index inside my grades array. So I want to start accessing my array at index 0. I want to keep accessing indexes while the index is less than the length of the array, which I can grab from the length property of my array. So grades.length should give me 5. I want to keep iterating from 0 up to but not including 5. And then I want to iterate one at a time. We're going to count by ones. So this loop right here should count from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we get to 5, I is no longer less than the length, and we will break out of the loop. Okay. So this counter-controlled loop will allow me to access all elements inside the grades array. Now I need a prompt. This is going to be an integer prompt. And so I'm going to go ahead and build a protected integer prompt using try-parse syntax and a while loop. And let me just knock this out really quick. So I'm going to say, we'll start with a write statement, console.write, and I will say, please enter grade, and we will use the current index plus 1. Our index counts 0, 1, 2, but humans like to count 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to add 1 to the index and print that number. So I'm going to ask the user to enter grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So prompt the user to enter the grade. Now I need to read in a grade. So I'm going to create a variable to hold the grade, so double grade. And then I'm going to create a variable to see that, to test, to hold the result of a try parse when I try to parse the string representation that the user entered into the actual double data type. So I'm going to create a Boolean variable. I'll call it parse OK is equal to double.tryparse console.readline. I'm going to try to stick the output into my grade variable. And then we will keep checking if the user enters something like kitten instead of a valid grade, we will tell the user to try again. So I'm going to say while the parse OK result is not equal to true, so while the parse fails, I'm going to reprompt console.write bad input, try again, and we will just try to get the try to do a read line, read in the new value. So here's my prompt to get a grade value. Once I have a valid grade value here, I'm going to put it into whatever index I'm on in the array. So we're prompting for, we're going to store the grade value into the array. So I'm going to take my array name, which is grades, plural, access it at the whatever index I'm on, and I'm going to say this is equal to grade. So if we add some notes here, here's a protected prompt for a grade. And then once we get the good grade, we store it in the array. Okay, so this loop is filling the array with grades. Now, how can I count how many of the grades are passing? So I want to check, I want to read all of the values in the array. Now I can do a read operation using a counter-controlled loop, exactly like I've built before, or I could do a read operation using a value-controlled loop. And I'm going to go ahead and code the solution using both examples, just so we can see how they both would look. So first we will read each grade from the grades array by iterating over the array by index. And then secondly, we will read each grade from the grades array by iterating over the array by value. First we'll do by index. Here, when I iterate over an array by index, I'm going to use exactly the same for loop. So I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0. We want to count through the indexes starting at 0. While I is less than the length of the array, I want to keep counting by ones. Okay, so this is the syntax to loop over the array by index. Now if I wanted to build this loop by iterating by value, it might look something like this. For each integer value in my grades array, I'm going to do something with each value. So here I'm pointing to the location, here I'm going to be using value. So both of these loops will allow us to grab each item in the array. Now the work that I'm trying to do is I want to count the number of passing grades. So I need a counter. So I need an accumulator variable. So let's create an accumulator variable. I'm going to create it in a variable called count. And my count I'm going to initialize. We initialize our accumulator to some starting point. So initially we've counted 0 passing grades. Why don't I call this pass count to make it more descriptive? So initialize my pass count to 0. How do I count grades? Well, inside the loop, I'm going to check and see if my grades value at index I is greater than or equal to 60, then I'm going to count it. Okay. Grades at index I is how I access each element inside an array when I iterate by index. So this conditional statement will only add 1 to the counter if the grade is a passing grade, and we'll print the results. Console.writeLine. I'll call this by index. I counted this many passing grades, and we'll pass my pass count value in. All right, let's do the same work when we are iterating by value. Well, I need to set my accumulator back to 0. We'll assume we haven't counted anything. And I'm going to say if the value is greater than equal to 60, then pass count plus plus. So in this case, I'm using the variable val is going to grab each individual grade from the grades array, one at a time, and I can compare that value against some test condition. And then finally, we'll print the results. So I will say console.writeLine by value. I have this many passing grades. And we'll pass count again. So hopefully you can see the kind of the similarities and differences between iterating by index, iterating by value, and you can see whether we do a write operation to each element in the array. Here I'm writing a new value, or a read operation. The iterate by index loop is the same. All right, let's run it just to make sure it works. All right, here we are asking the user to enter in a grade. First, I will enter a bad grade just to show that the protection is working. Protection is working. So we'll enter in 1 non-passing grade, a passing grade, non-passing grade, passing grade, and we'll have 3 passing grades. And by iterating by index and value, we both detect that.